Welcome to the next video in the GateStorm series. In this video, we're going to look at the random system, including random constraints. For this video, we're going to start with our previously saved Bank 3 Preset 1 patch. If you recall, we didn't have any local CV settings and only the reset triggers were enabled. We do have bank CV since bank CV is saved for the entire bank. So the first thing we're going to do is enable the local random trigger for lane 1. We've already moved the trigger that we're using from the mother 32 into the local trigger 1 input. Random has two different setting types, random control and random constraints. By selecting the pulse width button twice, brings up the lane random control. Steps and direction have multiple settings they can be set to. Let's start by looking at step. Pressing it once sets it to all. All means that each step in the active length area will be randomized. If we press it again, now we have random set to Euclidean mode. This means the active area will receive a random Euclidean pattern. If I press it again, now we're set to Euclidean plus offset. Normally when you generate a Euclidean pattern, the first step is always on. This allows it to randomize where the first step starts. One way to think of it is it rotates the pattern in the active area. Now something to note is when a random steps pattern is generated, the inactive area of the pattern will be filled with the same pattern over and over. This way, if something is modulating your length, you will have that pattern repeated over and over. So if we go back to the main page, pressing pulse width twice, and we activate a trigger, now we're generating Euclidean patterns. And remember, this is with offset. Now let's go back to the random control page. Let's talk about direction. We select direction once, it gives us direction mode. This means forward, backwards, and palindrome are possible random choices. If we press it again, now we get direction plus one shot. Sometimes you don't always want to have one shot available for random. You might not be using a trigger. One useful idea is if you didn't have a trigger plugged in, then when it's in one shot mode, it would actually effectively shut off the lane. Time base, length, and pulse width are all on-off settings. And they control whether the random system will randomize a value for all of those. Now if we look down at the simple lanes, we have source 1, source 2, logic, time base, density, and pulse width. Again, these are all on-off values and allows you to tell the random system whether you want a value to be randomly generated for those. Now remember, simple lanes can be set up to listen to the global triggers to do a random, or the bank settings for the bank triggers can randomize everything. Now something you might be thinking about now is having such a wide range of random selections doesn't always make sense in generating useful results. This is why GateStorm has a new concept called random constraints. Push the pulse width button again to select the random constraints page. So what does random constraint mean? Well, it means we want to limit the range or selection of values that random can choose from. This is really powerful if you want to select from a small selection that you think works really well with how you're using GateStorm. Here you can see that these are the lists of used values when random is enabled on the random control page. So let's go and select complex lane 1 again. And let's say we want to only allow a length of 8 and a length of 4. And we want to generate full random steps with a step density of 50%. So first we're going to go back to the random control page and set steps to full. Now we're going to go back to the random constraint page. So we want to set length 8 and length 4 to be the only valid options. So we select the length 1 button here, and now we're going to turn off everything but 4 and 8. If we press the pulse width button again, it will go ahead and move forward to the length 2 page, and we'll just shut off everything. Now press pulse width again to go back to the random constraint page. So now we want to set the density of steps. So we press the density button. We said we wanted 50% minimum and 50% maximum. So we press the min density button. We increase to 50%. Press any button to exit. Max density, bring it down to 50%. And then exit. Now if we press the pulse width button again, it goes back to the random constraint page. So let's go out of the constraint system and hit random a few times. If you notice, 4 of the steps are on, 4 are off, length 8. Now notice, the length isn't changing. Why is that? We don't have length turned on as a random option. Turn length on. Go back out. Now we have 4. And in here, 50% of the steps are on. Very powerful. Now, let's go in and turn the random to Euclidean. Exit back out. Now watch what happens when we randomize. It's always generating the same patterns. That's because we told it to use 50%. Well, with Euclidean, 50% is always going to generate the exact same pattern. So let's go back into the constraint system. We're going to go to density. We'll set the min density to 25% and the max density to 75%, and then go back out again. And now let's generate some random. So now our patterns are going to be between 25% and 75% of the Euclidean patterns. This is really good from keeping the Euclidean pattern from getting too many steps or too few steps. So let's just go back in and look at some of the random constraints for the simple lane. The simple lane has time base 1 and 2, just like the complex lane. We have pulse width, which both of them have. You can set the min and max range for the pulse width. We also have clock density for the simple lanes, which is down here. We have source 1 and source 2 for the logic function. We have the logic function, and we have invert. Invert allows you to select whether you want randomized to random the invert setting of source 1 and source 2 as well. So with the random system of GateStorm, you can see that you have a lot of control over your generated results. This makes random constrainable, so it's much more useful in a live situation. Let's save this to Bank 3 Preset 4. In the next video, we're going to look at preset switching with CV. Thanks for watching.